Ever notice how so many really creative people, like those who become famous, have this like intense energy? Kind of makes you wonder, what if that incredible drive, that spark, is somehow connected to, well, a different way of experiencing the world?
Oh, for sure. Like when you look at the lives of people who end up in the spotlight, you find all sorts of stories.
Yeah.
Right. And those stories often include mental health, like the whole spectrum.
Totally. And today we're going deep on a topic that hits close to home for a lot of folks, bipolar disorder. I might be surprised how many big names have dealt with it, and we're going to unpack all that today.
We're going to look at what it actually means to live with bipolar disorder, through the lens of celebs who've been open about their journey. We'll also dig into this fascinating question. Could there be a link between this condition and, well, the very source of creativity?
We've got a bunch of interesting stuff to work with here. We've got an article from bphope.com about celebs who are speaking out about having bipolar disorder. Then there's this really thought-provoking piece from Psychology Today exploring the whole bipolar creativity connection. Plus, some news from the Jerusalem Post and Weblog, even some Hebrew articles from ENED, all about this Israeli singer Nadav Guedj. To get a feel for the day-to-day, we've got this self-help piece from helpguy.org on coping, and even a Reddit thread where people are talking about artists and their mental health. Oh, and we'll be checking out the website of Enosh, the Israeli Mental Health Association, too. So, yeah, lots to cover.
We're basically trying to put it all together, understanding different people's stories, figuring out how they cope, and really looking at this whole mental health and creativity thing, straight from the sources.
Perfect. Let's get into it. So this bphope.com article mentions all these famous people talking openly about having bipolar disorder and what they call brain-based conditions. What exactly are they talking about when they use that term?
Brain-based conditions. It's like a catch-all term. It covers a lot of mental health conditions, the kind that we think have like a biological root. Stuff like bipolar, depression, anxiety, ADHD, all that. The point is that these things aren't just like a lack of willpower or a flaw in your character. They're about how your brain works.
Right. And it feels like by being so open, these celebs are trying to break down the stigma, which is huge. Do you think it's working? I mean, is it changing the conversation?
Oh, absolutely. When people you admire who are in the public eye share their struggles, that's powerful. It helps normalize mental health stuff so people who are struggling don't feel so alone, like it's okay to get help. It also challenges all the negative stereotypes. And the article has some great examples of this happening.
Yeah, like Faye Dunaway. She's had bipolar her whole life, and she talks about how those intense emotions, they definitely fueled her acting, but also maybe contributed to her reputation for being difficult. It's interesting. She manages it with doctors and medication, and she just sees it as part of her now.
Definitely. That self-acceptance is key. She gets the challenges, but doesn't let her diagnosis define her, It shows how mental health is just part of overall health, not something to be ashamed of.
There's Alan Richson, too, the guy from Richo. He's super open about being a suicide survivor. He even describes depression as this sinister force he couldn't control. He's got a tattoo, actually, of those comedy and tragedy masks. It represents the ups and downs of bipolar and ADHD. Like Dunaway, he just accepts it as a part of him.
Yeah, and talking about suicide, that's so important. It shows how serious this is and why getting help is so crucial. His tattoo is like a symbol, right? A reminder of what he's been through, a way to show those internal struggles.
And then there's Maria Bello, diagnosed at 28, but thinks she had it before. Now she calls her condition a gift, which is a big mental shift. She says those extreme emotions made her more empathetic. She even thinks it helped her acting, especially prepping for a role where she played this depressed and delusional mother in Lights Out.
Her story definitely points to this possible link between bipolar and creativity. That range of emotions, it can fuel artistic expression. She used her own experiences to play that character, and that suggests a lot of self-awareness.
Speaking of raw and honest, there's Selena Gomez. She was diagnosed in her early 20s. Her documentary, Selena Gomez, My Mind and Me, is like really eye-opening. It shows how hard it can be, struggling to get out of bed, canceling tours, even going through what she calls psychosis and paranoia. What does that even mean, psychosis, in this context?
It means losing touch with reality, basically. It can look different for different people. Some might have hallucinations, like seeing or hearing things that aren't there. Others might have delusions, like believing things that aren't true. It can be really scary.
That sounds so rough. And she says that being so open is a sacrifice for a greater purpose. She really stresses the importance of accepting and dealing with bipolar disorder, saying she'll always be working on my mental health. She must be such a role model for young people.
Oh, huge. For a young person to see someone successful be so real about mental health, That's validating. It shows that it's a journey, not like a finish line, and that you can still achieve things.
Maurice Bernard, he's been on General Hospital forever, was diagnosed at 22. He actually worked with the writers to make his character bipolar, which is a pretty unique way to raise awareness.
It really is. By putting his own experience into the show, he's not just validating himself, he's teaching a massive audience about bipolar disorder through a character they already know.
And then we have Maria Bamford, the comedian. She was diagnosed back in 2011 after a really tough time. Now she uses her stand-up and her Netflix show, Lady Dynamite, to normalize things like bipolar depression and even being hospitalized. And get this, she co-wrote a graphic novel with her husband, who also has bipolar too, told from the perspective of their pug.
That's so creative. Using humor is a really powerful way to connect with people on tough topics. And the graphic novel, I mean, who doesn't love pugs? It might make it easier for some people to approach the subject, you know?
David Faraday, he's a former pro golfer and broadcaster, wasn't diagnosed till 2011, but he's had symptoms for a long time. He says that getting diagnosed helped him understand himself and be more empathetic. He even said, "I don't suffer from bipolar disorder, I live with it." That shift from suffering to living, it feels important, right?
No, totally. That's a big part of managing chronic conditions. It's about accepting it and figuring out how to live your life. Not constantly fighting it.
Then we have Mary Lambert. She's a singer-songwriter and poet. She's really blunt about it in her song Secrets, singing, "I've got bipolar disorder, my shit's not in order." She calls herself a missionary for self-acceptance. And she's done so much, like voice acting, a body positivity workshop, even writing a book.
She's taking her experiences and turning them into chances to connect and advocate. And in so many ways, it's really inspiring.
Stephen Fry, the comedian, actor, and writer, made this powerful documentary back in 2006 called Stephen Fry, The Secret Life of a Manic Depressive. It got a ton of praise. And in his memoir, he talks about his experience to fight stigma, saying that people with mental illness are just like them, but with something extra. He's a really big advocate.
His work has been huge in raising awareness and fighting stigma, especially in the UK. He's really good at making a topic relatable and understandable, which helps fight those misconceptions.
Margaret Trudeau, she's a mental health advocate who was married to a former Canadian prime minister and is the mother of the current one. She's been a public figure since she was young, even before being diagnosed. She's written 4 books, one called Changing My Mind, and she's all about celebrating life with bipolar and fighting.
She's been through a lot, and seeing how the public's view of mental health has changed over time. She really highlights how crucial support networks are, too.
Richard Dreyfuss, the Oscar winner, was diagnosed way back at age 11. He said some interesting things, like how he enjoys the creative beauty of his manic depression and wishes others could see the diamond in the soil of bipolar disorder. He's basically saying he's made it work and that stigma is pointless.
His view is definitely unique. He's focusing on the potential upside while still acknowledging the tough stuff. But his message about stigma, that's so important. There are still so many barriers for people with mental health conditions.
And finally, we have Jane Pauley, who's been on tons of news shows. She was diagnosed at 50 and has become a big advocate. She wrote a memoir, Skywriting, where she talks about how she lost her sense of self during episodes and describes hypomania as this like whirlwind of feelings and ideas. When she says hypomania, what's the difference between that and like full-on mania?
It's like mania, but less intense. With hypomania, you might have more energy and feel super productive, which some people connect to creativity, but it usually doesn't mess with your judgment as much or lead to psychosis like mania can. But it's still something to be aware of because it can turn into full-blown mania if you don't manage it.
Makes sense. So she decided to be open about her experience, hoping that it would help at least one person. It's pretty amazing to see so many successful people using their platform to shed light on bipolar disorder.
It is. So building on these stories, let's switch gears and look at the science. Our Psychology Today article digs into the research on whether there really is a link between bipolar disorder and creativity, like we've been hinting at.
That study by Nancy Andreessen back in the 70s was a big deal. She was looking for a connection between creativity and schizophrenia in famous authors, but ended up finding this strong link to mood disorders instead.
It was a surprise, for sure. And it kicked off a lot more research, like Kay Redfield Jamison's study in 1989. She looked at British authors and artists, and a big chunk of them, especially poets, had been treated for mood disorders. A lot of them said their moods, energy, and thinking changed before or during creative bursts. Things like feeling more enthusiastic, energetic, and like their thoughts were just flowing.
Which Like we said, sounds a lot like hypomania, right? Less sleep, feeling super happy, excited. It's hard to miss the connection.
Right. And that brings us to the evolutionary argument. Usually genes that cause debilitating disorders become less common over time because of natural selection. But bipolar disorder is still around. So maybe those genes, or at least milder versions of them, actually offer some kind of advantage. The article even mentions that bipolar is more common in higher socioeconomic groups, which makes you wonder if it's somehow linked to success.
So maybe groups with more creative people have a stronger sense of community, are more advanced in science and tech, and have better survival chances.
It's a theory, but it's hard to prove that something like that happened over such a long period. And just because two things are connected doesn't mean one caused the other. Bipolar might be more common in certain groups, but it doesn't automatically mean it made them successful. There's environment, opportunity, all that stuff too. But the fact that these genes are still around, despite the challenges of bipolar disorder, does suggest there might be an upside, at least in some cases. The article also looks at why individuals might be more creative.
Like the idea that creative people are more open to new experiences, like to explore, take risks, and are okay with things not being totally clear. I can see how that would lead to more interesting art, but maybe also make them more emotionally sensitive.
Right. There's also the idea that psychological discomfort itself can drive creativity. That was psychiatrist Felix Post's theory. He thought it might be a way for people to deal with their inner struggle. And Anthony Storr said that being creative can be a way to protect yourself from depression and feel more in control.
And there was that Stanford study where people with bipolar in creative fields actually scored higher on creativity tests compared to people without bipolar. That feels like pretty strong evidence for a connection.
It is interesting data. They also found some personality traits shared by people with bipolar and creative folk, like being open to new experiences, but also being more irritable and prone to mood swings.
So what they're saying is that maybe the down times allow for thinking and focusing, while the up times bring the vision and confidence to create a tricky balance.
Totally. It's not like everyone with bipolar is a creative genius, and not every creative genius has bipolar. It's much more complicated than that. And like the article says, severe episodes actually make it harder to be creative, so it's not like bipolar itself is the key to genius.
Yeah.
Maybe being super creative makes you more likely to have bipolar, or maybe people with bipolar are just drawn to artistic careers. We don't really know for sure.
So it's more of an association than a clear cause and effect, which makes the story of Nadav Guedj even more interesting. He's the Israeli singer who was in Eurovision in 2015 with that song Golden Boy. That was a pretty big deal for Israel, breaking their streak of not qualifying.
It was. And now he's being really open about his mental health. After being out of the spotlight for 5 years, he posted on Instagram that he's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
And he didn't hold back. He talked about psychosis, being hospitalized against his will, and these extreme crisis moments. It sounds really intense, like his mind and body were betraying him.
He said he couldn't break free from the loop, which really captures the feeling of bipolar, how it can cycle.
But he also talked about feeling renewed, like he's stronger, more whole, and healthier. And he's got this new single coming out called Meshuggah Crazy, which seems like he's using his music to deal with everything.
It's a big step, sharing his journey through his music. And that title, Meshuggah, it definitely suggests a direct connection to his experiences.
But it's interesting, there's this report from 2018 about him being kicked out of the Israeli Army Choir for continuous disciplinary problems. He even refused to be in a documentary, saying, "Stop at the games, I'm not performing today, Kapara." Right to the camera.
Yeah, and the IDF spokesperson said he wouldn't follow the rules or do his assigned tasks. Looking back, maybe that was a sign of his bipolar, even before he was diagnosed. It shows how much it can impact your life, even in areas you wouldn't expect.
And before he dropped out of the public eye, he released a single in 2017, which did okay, but not as well as Golden Boy. Maybe his mental health was already affecting him back then.
It's possible. The Hebrew articles from ENET called his diagnosis mania depression, which is an older term for bipolar. They really emphasize how extreme the mood swings can be and how much they affect everyday life.
It's good to know there are support organizations in Israel, like Enosh. Their website shows that they recognize the need for help and resources.
Having those organizations is so important. They provide help, fight stigma, and create a sense of community for people dealing with mental health issues. Hopefully, Nadav Guedj, being so open, will encourage others to seek help.
Now, switching gears again, the helpguide.org article offers some really practical advice for coping with bipolar disorder. It's not about being helpless, it's about taking control.
Exactly. Medication and therapy are essential, but self-help strategies are crucial too. It's about managing symptoms, preventing relapses, and feeling more in control of your life. They list 7 key skills.
Like the first one, being involved in your treatment, being an active participant, learning about the illness, working with your doctors, being patient, being open, taking your meds as prescribed, and going to therapy.
It's about being proactive and working as a team with your healthcare providers. Understanding bipolar and your treatment plan helps you make better choices.
The second one is about monitoring your symptoms and moods, paying attention to small changes in how you feel, your sleep, energy levels, and thoughts, knowing your triggers and the warning signs, keeping a mood chart, all that.
That self-awareness is key for catching things early. If you see those little changes before an episode hits full force, you might be able to lessen the severity or even stop it.
Then there's acting on those warning signs, having a bunch of coping skills ready to go, like talking to someone, getting extra sleep, maybe cutting back on activities, using support group, calling your doctor or therapist, doing something creative, relaxation techniques, getting some light exposure, exercise, or asking for help. And having a plan in case of emergency with important contacts, medications, and what you want to happen if things get really bad.
It's like having a toolbox of things that work for you and a plan for when things get really rough. You're not just waiting for something to happen. You're ready.
Number 4 is reaching out for face-to-face connection. Building a strong support system, not isolating yourself, joining support groups, and actively building new relationships. So basically, human connection is really important.
Definitely. Having people who get it and can support you, whether it's listening or helping out, makes a big difference. Support groups are great for that sense of community too, knowing you're not alone.
Number 5 is developing a daily routine. Having set times for sleep, eating, socializing, exercise, work, and relaxing. A routine keeps things stable.
It helps regulate your body's natural rhythms, which can get messed up with bipolar. Consistent sleep is especially important because sleep problems can trigger mood episodes.
Number 6 is keeping stress to a minimum. Knowing your limits, doing things like deep breathing and meditation, and making time for leisure activities.
Stress is a known trigger, so learning to manage it and making time for enjoyable activities can really help. And even if you don't have bipolar, these are good tips for anyone, right? Getting enough sleep, managing stress, it's good for everyone.
And the last one is watching what you eating a healthy diet, maybe supplementing with omega-3s, avoiding alcohol and drugs, and being careful with all medication, all connected, your physical and mental health.
Right. The article talks about how what you eat and whether you use substances can really impact your mood.
It's encouraging that even with something as complex as bipolar disorder, there are things you can do to manage your well-being.
And they also mentioned some resources like the NAMI helpline and DBSA support groups so people know where to go for help.
Finally, we took a look at this Reddit thread where users were talking about artists and mental health. It's more casual, but it shows that people are talking about this connection between creativity and mental health, which is cool. The original poster was looking for inspiration, saying pain is hard to see, which is so true, right? We don't always see what people are going through.
That sense of community in the thread is really interesting. People are more aware of mental health now, and they want to understand artists on a deeper level, seeing the human side of their work.
Totally. They mention a bunch of artists who have talked publicly about having bipolar disorder, like Michael Angelakos from Passion Pit, Halsey, and Pete Wentz from Fallout.
They also talked about a bunch of other conditions like anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, BPD, and ADHD, which shows that artists are just as diverse as anyone else when it comes to mental health. It's a good reminder that these are common struggles.
Someone made a good point about not diagnosing people based on what you think you see, which is important. But then they started talking about fan theories like Olivia Rodrigo's song Lacy, and whether it's about eating disorders and body image, even though she hasn't said anything, and how some people think Lady Gaga's 9/11 is about antipsychotic medication.
It shows that people are thinking about these things, right?
Yeah.
They're connecting with the music and trying to understand what it means, especially in terms of mental health.
They also mention artists like Kid Cudi and Frank Ocean, whose music seems influenced by depression and trauma. It's like art becomes this powerful way to process and express those difficult.
It seems like a lot of people think that artists deal with mental health stuff, even if we don't always see it. And that creates this sense of connection with fans who might be going through something similar.
So to wrap things up, it's really encouraging that so many people in the public eye are choosing to share their experiences with bipolar disorder. It's a big step in breaking down stigma and helping people understand.
We've looked at the research suggesting this link between bipolar disorder and creativity, how those with bipolar may have certain personality traits that make them more artistic, and the idea that stable periods might be the most creative time.
And Nadav Guedj's story, being open about his journey after being silent for so long, makes it all real, you know? It shows how much people struggle and how they can find strength and hope.
And the practical advice from helpguide.org, those coping strategies, show that people have a lot of power in managing their condition.
The Reddit thread is interesting, too. It's like a snapshot of how people think about mental health and art.
It all comes back to people being vulnerable and sharing their stories. That has a ripple effect, making everyone more understanding and empathetic.
So here's something to think about. How does seeing all these people, from actors to singers, being open about their struggles, change how you think about mental health and creativity? Could it make you more understanding and empathetic, not just toward famous people, but toward people in your own life who are dealing with similar things? Maybe it even makes you want to learn more from organizations like Enosh or those mentioned in the Help Guide article. It's definitely worth thinking about.